Then I want to introduce to you a couple of single malt bottlings that we have done. One from the wonderful Campbelltown distillery called Springbank.
Wow, I love Springbank.
Well, you'll love this one. I'm
100%
pretty certain.
handmade.
Okay, so you've got it there.
Yes,
yeah.
yes.
If you'd like just to pour 2 of those.
Sure.
Springbank, of course, is one of the few remaining distilleries down in Campbellton, which 150 years ago used to have 30 distilleries.
Yes.
But Springbank is an absolute classic nowadays. It's commanding top prices. It's very complex, lots of apricot, lots of, well, you get a little bit of that sort of smokiness coming through, but more to do with the spices, white peppers, and that lovely Campbelltown oiliness that you get that's so characteristic of the distillery itself.
I think this Springbank is so different like the official bottle. There's a lot of melon, a lot of fruity flavor.
Yes, pineapples, melons, that sort of thing you'll get from this one. You see, what Dougie does, and his name is on the front, Dougie McIver,
Yes.
who selects all these casks. He typically will take a parcel of casks from various different distilleries, maybe 50 or 100 casks, and he may choose one, he may choose none. But what he's looking for is something which is atypical, which is different to the distillery bottlings. Obviously, a distillery has much more access to many more casks. But if we find a cask that is particularly peculiar, different from the distillery bottlings, that's the one we really want. And if it's really good,
So
then we'll bottle it under
We try a lot of
name.
Springbank right now. We try this BBR Springbank wheel. Amazing, you know.
You'll find it complete, not completely different. It's still got the same character.
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know?
yeah.
Mm.
Oh, so good.
Creamy and oily on the palate, so it's quite thick, as we call it in the words of whiskey language. But yet it's got wonderful fruitiness, apricots in particular there, and then the pineapples, as you say.
Yes, yes.
Things like bergamot coming through, and ginger, a little bit of gingerbread, ginger cake. It's really interesting. So that one was bottled, it's 1991 and bottled in 2000.
It's a very old
and 18.
Yes.
So yes, the 90s, you know, Campbellton and particularly Springbank have kept the old methods. And there are a lot of distilleries that have put on the fast forward button. Said they've speeded up the mashes, they've speeded up the distillation, they've speeded up maturation in some way or other, and they're drinking them younger. But Campbellton is one of those ones, particularly Springbank, that still loves the virtues of the old style of producing whiskey, the unhurried, artisanal way of producing old Scotch whiskies, which sadly in most distilleries has been lost. So the whiskies from the 70s to 80s and 90s, beginning of the 90s, in my view, as being an old timer, were representative of just the unhurried fashion of making whiskies, which made them, in my view, just gave them an edge over the 90s and 2000s.
Ronnie, I thought the Springbank, the old whiskey, old age statement is so good, so beautiful, but it's hard to find such an old age statement 26 years old. Why it's hard to find for Springbank?
I think the popularity of Springbank suddenly took off probably 20 years ago, and particularly amongst the connoisseurs, the people who really loved not so much the name Springbank, but what they were doing, what they were producing, and the artisan way of producing it. And to me that is hugely admirable, that people didn't actually, the big commercial companies didn't go in and buy it out and say, we're going to do this, we're going to produce more. They cleverly, and I think differently to the other distilleries that existed in Campbellton, decided that they were going to go the quality route. And they were going to look after the flavour, and they're not going to have a hurried process and speed it up in any which way. So this is just, it's a rarity to find this. But Springbank is one of those lovely distilleries that still has a great reputation of producing artisanal whiskies.
So beautiful, so beautiful.
It's a lovely dram, isn't it? And then I brought another one along called Bunnahabhain. This is obviously from the island of Islay. It's not totally easy to pronounce, but in Scotland we say Bunna.
There is a Bunna.
Bunna.
Okay.
Now this has got, this is more sort of honeyed in its expression. There's a very small trace of peat smoke there in this Bunna, but Bunna is, along with brevis, they're better known for non-peated styles of Islay whiskey. But here you've got a lovely fruitiness.
Bunna keep a lot of sherry casks from the Addington group, the timing.
Absolutely
But
right.
this is sherry or bourbon?
This one I think is I should say, I think it's more, it certainly is, the flavour is bourbon, or at least American wood, rather than Spanish sherry. There are no sherry notes in here. It's more of a sort of vanillas and honeys and that sort of thing. And whilst Bunna is, to me has an almost Speyside elegance to it. Yes. It's a lovely soft expression. The tiny little bit of peat smoke there. So this is the sort of thing that I would drink probably before dinner. So this is 1988,
yes,
and bottled in 2018, is it? Say that.
I still have the old 2017 whiskey, the beautiful flavor come out. Yeah, so good.
These are lovely old classic styles of whiskey, and the style definitely has changed. Some people say it's improved, and old timers like me say that it's changed. In some ways better, in some ways the older ones still represent.
We like old stuff.
We like old stuff. We like old stuff. This is like fruit pastels in a glass. You could go on sniffing this even when the glass is empty. It's such an elegance. It's a deep elegance and complex, and it comes out in layers. It's like a sort of floral, fruity carpet.
Yeah, every time I drink the old whiskey, they always have the sweet. It's a different sweet. You almost cannot describe it. The sweet is so complex.
And so integrated too. So it doesn't taste sweet. It's not like a sweet white wine. It's much more integrated with the wood and also the character of the distillery. And that makes it very, very special. So moving on, I just wanted to introduce to you, we've got glasses, we've got two more glasses. Something called the Perspective series.
This have a beautiful picture.
And this was done by a famous Scottish photographer whose name is Lindsay Robertson. And he is one of the more famous because he was invited to go and exhibit in the States when black and white photography was kind of emerging back in the 70s and 80s. And he is particularly loved in the world of black and white photography. So we teamed up with him because there's so much in common between old whiskies and the moment, capturing that moment in time. And his were some of his most famous pictures, and in this case it is of the island beaches. What he loved to do was to take special locations in Scotland and get the light absolutely right, which you have to do, of course, with black and white photography. But when we got him together with the whiskey, we found, like with a lot of artists, there's an enormous amount of similarity in the arts between a pianist and a whiskey maker, between an artist who's painting and a whiskey maker, and a photographer and a whiskey maker.
Because whiskey is art.
Whiskey is art.
Picture is art. Painting is art.
Painting is art. And there's a wonderful Latin expression which goes Vita brevis ars longa, which means that life is short, but art goes on forever. And I think this is just a typical example. We had a whole lot of blended whiskies, some of which were 40 years old, some of which were younger. This is the 21-year-old. We had a 30-year-old and a 35-year-old. And we put them together in a series, which is called the Perspective Series, which is now available and collectible because it's very limited, very finite. And we will be doing similar sort of things, I think, going forward, because there's been an enormous amount of interest in this for top-end blended whiskies. So these have got grain in them, grain whiskies as well as malt whiskies in them. A wonderful combination, I think. I hope you'll enjoy this. So these are the sort of things that Berry Brothers and Rudd is doing. We used to be the owner of Glenrothes whiskey, which we sold back to the distiller, the Edrington Group. So they've got Macallan, Glenrothes, Highland Park, obviously. And we found ourselves with a gap in the market. But for us, it's pretty straightforward, because we were probably the first ever company to do what we call independent bottlings back in the 19th century, so nearly 200 years ago. We would have casks in this building, and people would come in with their bottles and select whiskey from one cask, and then it would be put into their bottles and people would take it away. Nowadays, the Scotch whisky regulations mean that you can't bottle Scotch whisky outside Scotland. But 200 years ago, Berry Brothers and Rudd was probably the first, if not the only, bottler of single malts in the UK, and probably in the world. So it's a little bit of history.
No SWA.
No SWA, exactly that, exactly that. But it gives me great pleasure anyway to be able to present some of these whiskies, many of which are particularly well known already in Taiwan, but to welcome you here to Berry Brothers and Rudd.
Thank you so much.
As a fellow master of the Keepers of the Quake, and a man who deserves that accolade more than very many of us, because you have done so much for the Scotch whisky industry in Taiwan. So I thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.很开心今天来到了 BBR 的总部，这个后面就是白金汉宫。过去英国皇室都透过这个 BBR 直接下面有个地下甬道，直接将酒呢运到白金汉宫去。然后我们现在所坐的地方呢，刚刚我们很开心来这儿的时候遇到了 Ronnie， 他们的全球品牌大使。Ronnie 呢特别介绍这几支酒给我，然后因此我再一次的跟大家来说一下这几支酒到底 BBR 想要说什么样的故事呢？第一支酒呢，它是用雪莉桶来进行熟成的。BBR 他们有一贯性的特征，都是拥有着皇室的优雅而细致的风味。这支雪莉桶呢，我刚刚就跟 Ronnie 说，非介绍给那些雪莉桶的爱好者来说，这简直是接近完美的一个做法的东西。它优雅而细致，而带有标准的雪莉桶的风味。而第二支呢，是来自于艾雷岛的风味。Ronnie 特别说了，艾雷岛不一定要颜色很深的，因为它们能够展现出清楚的来自于海风的气味。这支呢，就完整的展现出了所谓的艾雷岛的风味。而第三支也很特别，很多人一直以为泥煤炭味就所谓的海岛来自于的味道，而这支记录了所谓的来自于苏格兰本岛的泥煤炭味，那优雅细致，带点青草味，甚至有很多因为石楠木所造成的一些蜜香，这个很棒的一个气味。然后第三支呢，这两支又进入了完全不同的系列。这两支呢是属于单桶系列，这支 Springbank 云顶呢，这我喝过，这 最好的云顶当中的其中几支。这支云顶呢，跟我们一般喝的有麦馊味啦，非常强烈年轻的云顶的气味不一样，因为它20几年的气味，所以它有很多老酒的美好风味，而带有丰富的果香。我在形容这支酒的时候，我觉得它有很多的那种像凤梨啦。有很多像是哈密瓜的味道都保存在这里面。如果有机会，我们看到这支呢，一定要尝尝看。这支布纳哈本也是很棒的。我刚跟 Ronnie 聊到的时候，布纳哈本因为过去属于爱丁顿集团的，所以它拥有更多的雪莉桶的风味。而这支呢，它更多的来自于波本桶的气味呢，因此呢，展现了布纳哈本完全不同的风格。再加上它仍然是一支老酒，那老酒的味道非常的迷人。而最后一支呢，Ronnie 介绍给我们的是就所谓的摄影系列的调和威士忌。这支威士忌呢，真是调和式威士忌的翘楚啊！它将谷类威士忌跟麦芽威士忌完美的融合在一起，那表现出来的气味呢，一样是遵循着 BBR 英国皇室的传统，优雅而细致的美丽。今天在这儿呢，我们呢不只是看到这支呢，虽然我不能喝它的号称目前全世界仅存最老的威士忌160年了啊，好希望可以喝它哦。不过希望下次有机会可以喝它。我们除了这样之外呢，我们听了很多的有关于 BBR 的故事。下次有机会，如果你到伦敦，别忘了 St. James No. 3这个地址，你一定要记住，来这来拜访 BBR。我是纸杯大叔林一峰。我忘了去面试了。
I'll just tell you a little story of I think it was the third time I arrived in Taiwan in my life. The first time, nobody was drinking single malt whiskey. In fact, nobody was drinking whiskey at all. Everybody was drinking red wine. So I said, there must be a way. These are very educated, cultured people who must love single malt going forward. And I thought, well, we have an ambassador in Taiwan, and I must learn some Taiwanese so that I can say hello. So I practiced on the plane going over, ni hama, ni hama, ni hama, ni hama. And when I arrived at Taipei Airport, this lovely lady ambassador came to pick me up from the airport. So I said to her with a smile, ni hama, and she looked very surprised. Of course, she was surprised that I knew anything in Taiwanese. So I said, well, I must have got this wrong. So I said, ni ma hao. And she looked even more surprised that I knew her mother. Of course, I didn't know what I was talking about. So I thought again I must have got it wrong. So I said, ma, ni hao. Then, of course, it was all explained to me afterwards, what a mistake I had made.
What a wonderful story.